Well, imagine that you travel to a distant city, and you're probably never going to go to this city again. You're eating out one night, you're at a restaurant, you know you'll never be back. Should you tip your waiter? Well, if you're like most people, you probably do, but rationally, in kind of cold, but it doesn't really make any sense to tip. Because it's not legally required, and there's really going to be no consequences for you if you've upset your waiter. Now, if it was your hometown diner, it might be different because you're going to see that waiter again. But when you're traveling, it doesn't really matter. So people often tip, even though rationally they don't really need to. Why do people do that? And why are people so generous in many other situations? When researchers have wanted to take this kind of phenomenon in the lab, they've used more stylized versions of this tipping scenario and really controlled things, really kept things anonymous, kind of like you're in a foreign city, but even better control over it. And even then, what people find is that people are still very generous. If you're paired anonymously with someone in the lab and given the opportunity to give them money at your own expense, many people will still do that. And so the question is why? And typical theories developed in economics and biology about reciprocation and reputation depend on things that are seemingly absent here, things like the opportunity to see the person again, the opportunity for them to reciprocate. And so those don't seem to provide an explanation. And so many researchers have turned to various other more complicated explanations having to do with group selection based on genetic group selection or cultural group selection. And these are very complicated models that depend on a lot of assumptions that many other researchers in the field aren't too comfortable making. And so our idea was, well, maybe you don't need to go that route to understand why people are this nice. Maybe there's actually a simpler explanation that actually does have to do with these basic processes that we know exist, like reputation and reciprocity. And the basic idea is that whenever you meet someone, you don't actually know the future of that relationship. You could meet them, they could seem like someone you'll get along with, you'll see over and over again, but maybe they'll die of a heart attack tomorrow, or maybe you will. You don't know for certain. Or if you think someone you're not going to see again, maybe you'll end up meeting them again 5 weeks down the road, a month down the road. And it could matter that you stiff them on the bill or something similar like that. And this uncertainty is going to be true. There's no way to reduce this uncertainty to zero. There's always going to be this uncertainty. And so given that, you're never going to be sure what's going on. And so you want to avoid making the most costly error. There's always a chance you'll make an error. If I meet you and it turns out I'm going to see you over and over again, the error I could make is to think I won't see you again, and I could hold back my kindness. And that'll probably cause you to hold back kindness as well. And now we're both kind of at a mutual a standoff, neither of us is being nice, and so we've lost out on any productive relationship we could have had. And that was an error because it turned out we were both wrong. We would have seen each other a bunch. That's a big error to make. We've lost out on a lot. Whereas if I meet you and it turns out that I actually will never see you again in my life, but I mistakenly am nice to you anyway, well, I've given up a little bit of my time or energy to you. That's not that big a cost. It was a cost, but not that big compared to the huge cost in the other case of shutting down this cooperative relationship before it starts. So what we were trying to understand is maybe there's a simpler solution to this problem, to understand why people are so nice to each other. And we think that has to do with the inherent uncertainty whenever you meet somebody. So I might meet you and it turns out we'll have a long relationship, or I might meet you and it turns out we'll have a very short relationship, maybe just this one interaction. Now, if we're going to have a long relationship, I could make an error and assume we won't, be unkind to you. That's probably going to make you unkind in turn, and that shuts down this long relationship. Whereas if we were going to have a short relationship, I could make an error, think it was going to be long, be nice to you, and in a sense, rationally, that's kind of a waste because I didn't really get anything out of that. Sounds cold, but it's kind of a waste to do that. Now the problem is, you make these errors because you can never be sure which situation is which. And so once you include that fact in your modeling of how humans evolve, so we did a series of computer simulations of the evolution of human cooperation. Once you include that fact, what you find is that people evolve to be very cooperative. Even if they're actually very certain they're in this situation where they won't see the person again. They think, our little simulated people can think that they're never going to see their interaction partner again, yet they'll want to cooperate with them. And that has to do with the fact that there's always this inherent uncertainty. And so you want to really maximize the chance that you capture these cooperative relationships, even if that means you make a few errors of being nice to people that logically, rationally, maybe there wasn't much utility there. The typical thinking in the field among behavioral economists and often biologists is that if you think you're in an interaction where you're never going to see this person again, the best thing to do is to defect. Don't cooperate, don't be kind. Whereas what we find is the opposite. When we actually take into account the fact that there's this inherent uncertainty, you find the opposite. People want to cooperate. Our little simulated people want to be nice to individuals, even if they think never going to see this person again. And this is without incorporating kind of a complex, abstruse explanations for what's going on. All you need to take into account of is inherent uncertainty in social life. So that's where I think that's one of the main ways this work diverges from past thinking on this issue. I think they converge pretty strongly. I mean, in philanthropy generally, you're donating to people who you don't expect to see, you don't expect to necessarily meet, yet you're interested in helping them out. And I think what our finding is kind of the same thing, is that we show that humans can evolve to be interested in helping out people even when they don't think they're going to see these people again, even when the relationship per se is not going to exist beyond the specific interaction. So I think actually maybe it does help explain why people, one part of why people might be interested in philanthropy. There's other reasons too, kind of do with other types of evolved evolutionary considerations why philanthropy appeals to people. But yeah, this kind of explanation might tie in as well. Yeah.